On July the 15th, 2007, a normal day at Loudoun Castle Park in Scotland ended in disaster when a ride operator sadly lost his life whilst working on the Rat roller coaster. An investigation into the incident brought up questions into staff training and safety at the park, but the outcome of the trial would divide Scotland, many believing it was the wrong verdict. After the shock tragedy, Loudoun Castle would never recover and would eventually close its doors a few years later. But what happened on that fateful day? Let's talk about it. This is the infamous Rat roller coaster disaster, the death of Mark Blackwood. Loudoun Castle was originally built in the early 1800s as a replacement for an earlier castle on the site that was destroyed in the 14th century. It was constructed between 1805 and 1811 and was bought by the Marsh and Baxter Company in the 1920s, who repurposed the castle into a holiday camp known as Baxter Village. Tragedy struck in 1941 when a devastating fire broke out, gutting the castle's interior and leaving only its outer walls standing. Despite efforts to revive it, the castle remained abandoned until the 1990s when it was transformed into a theme park, which opened in 1995. After opening, Loudoun Park quickly established itself as one of Scotland's most popular theme parks, and during the summer, it was the place to be. Visitors from the golden era of the park, which was from the 1990s to the early 2000s, often have very positive memories of the park. It featured a variety of different roller coasters, one of these being the Rat. The Rat was one of the more notable roller coasters at Loudoun Castle theme park, and it was designed by the rides company Mora Rides. The Rat was a wild mouse type roller coaster, featuring sharp turns and sudden drops. The ride opened in 2005 and ran without issue until July of 2007, when the self-proclaimed best theme park in Scotland came under serious scrutiny. That day was July the 15th, 2007, and it was Mark Blackwood's first day operating the roller coaster. It was claimed by colleagues he was quite nervous, but willing to do it anyway. At approximately 11:40 in the morning, one of the cars had gotten stuck on the track. This wasn't abnormal, and had apparently happened multiple times in the past. As this happened, one of Mark's co-workers, 19-year-old Lauren Gemmell, had walked past the ride and noticed the car was stuck. It was Mark's first day on the ride and he wasn't exactly sure what to do. He shouted down to Lauren, "What should I do?" In which she replied, "I don't know. From what I have seen before, you should just push it." Mark then proceeded to climb onto the track whilst it was in operation and push the stuck car. However, as Mark pushed the car, he tripped. The car set off again, with Mark clinging on for dear life. According to Anne Scott, who was on the ride with her two young children, he was clearly scared and unsure what to do. His co-worker, who was now watching on in horror, said, "I was shouting him to let go, but the car continued with Mark holding on. The ride, still going, began to climb the track, and Mark fell. He fell 80 feet to the ground, which was seen by many in the park. One witness who was on the ride said, the man just didn't have the strength to keep holding on, and he fell after the car went round the second corner. I pushed the emergency stop button of the ride, and several people went to help give first aid. He was now lying unconscious on the floor. Emergency services were called and arrived quickly on the scene. He was taken to Cross House Hospital, outside of Kilmarnock, but sadly died from his injuries. After the incident, the police released a statement saying, "We can confirm an 18-year-old man died in hospital following an accident at Loudoun Castle. A report will be prepared for the Procurator Fiscal and the Health and Safety Executive has been made aware." The ride was then shut down and an investigation was immediately launched. The next day, a park spokesman said, "The ride has been closed voluntarily while our investigations continue, which could be well for the next few days. We are trying to find out exactly what happened." Although the incident occurred in 2007, the trial did not start until late September 2009. Mark had only received training that day. Gary Erkson, who was in charge of showing Mark the ropes, claimed that Mark was shown how to operate the ride and that he should have known exactly what to do and what not to do. He stated that as part of his training, he was told over and over again that he should not, for any reason, enter the ride area, and if a ride had broken down, he was reported to the maintenance team. He said, "I told him, if there is any problem, any difficulty, any untoward, you radio either myself or radio maintenance." He went on to say that Mark was a fantastic operator for other rides and said, "I thought he was absolutely brilliant with customers. He had that wee bit extra." His friend Richard Baldwin and fellow ride operator said that people who operated the Rat roller coaster would often push the ride once it had gotten stuck. He said, "I pushed the carriage. If you didn't press the button long enough, it would stop. You would push it to get it back on track." He said that it was pointless calling the maintenance team, as they would do the exact same thing. He claimed if the maintenance team were called, they would simply push the ride to get it going again. This led to Barry Baker, the health and safety executive who was investigating this incident, to criticise the level of training at Loudoun Castle. He believed that the training Mark had received was inadequate and mere blanket instructions. He explained to the court, "You have got to go through the reasoning behind why the ride operates that way, what could go wrong, and what you would be expected to do if it went wrong. If you simply tell someone don't touch, the answer is why not. If you issue an instruction without context, it is very difficult for someone to put that on a risk perception." However, the defence for Loudoun Park claimed their training was up to scratch and consistent with other theme parks in the UK. The jury was also shown a sign on the staff bungalow which warned operators of entering the ride area. After a 2-week trial at Kilmarnock Sheriff Court, the jury found the theme park operators and the owners at Loudoun Castle not guilty of failing to provide adequate training and supervision. No one was charged, and Loudoun Castle wanted everyone to quickly forget about the accident. It did not receive a lot of media coverage, and the park did try and move on, but they never really recovered. 3 years after the death of Mark Blackwood, Loudoun Park, which had been one of Scotland's most popular theme parks, was closed down for good. Owner Henk Benboom made this decision and said it was no longer economically viable. Although it was never stated by the owners, it was clear that the horror incident at the park led to less visitors, which led to the park closing down. The people in Scotland knew what happened. Although some of the rides were sold, many were left abandoned on the castle's grounds. Many props and rides remained untouched for years before being dismantled and taken away. Some still remain there to this day. Sadly, the castle and the grounds have been left to rot and remain abandoned. Although there is little to no information online about him, it was clear that Mark was a well-liked person, and as of 2022, people are still leaving comments on his Find a Grave site, expressing how much they miss him. May he rest in peace. As always, this is not an AI channel, I do everything myself, and if you appreciate my work, subscribe, and if you want to go the extra step to support the channel, maybe consider becoming a member. Do you think Loudoun Theme Park should have been held accountable for the death of Mark Blackwood, or was it just a freak accident? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching.